And hello again from WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm Josh Manning, Deputy Managing Editor at the Western Journal. Joining me on the show today, a regular on the show, Joey Chester. He's an assignment editor for the Western Journal, and a newcomer, good friend of ours, guest contributor, Paul Weber with Liftable TV.
Josh, Joey, great to be with you guys.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
I am thrilled anytime anyone is willing to go on the air with me.
You picked me up out of the hallway.
Yeah. Well, we are so glad you're here with us this afternoon, and we'll get right into it. There's a whole lot of stuff going on out there right now, but I think one of the biggest things that's worth talking about is cancel culture and how it relates specifically to Joe Rogan right now. And it's not particularly that Rogan is especially heroic, though someone who's standing under this much pressure could certainly be called a hero. But it is the length people are going to crush Rogan for simply being willing to say things that run counter to the establishment narrative, right? So now Neil Young, who, about 3 generations worth of Americans had no idea who this guy was. Now, not only is he wanting to, is he saying he wants to pull his content? Yeah. Who else? Were you and I looking at this earlier today? He's pushing to pull other people's
It's like
content.
a bunch of burnt out artists.
He's trying,
that no one's listened to
a
since
bunch of
the 70s.
Yeah, a bunch of.
Hey, be careful now. As
burnouts.
a Kent State graduate who knows Tin Soldiers and Nixon's coming pretty well. Come on.
Well, those were days, man.
Those were days.
So, and part of the deal with Rogan is if anybody is too big to be canceled, it's probably Rogan, and they're doing their darndest to actually get him canceled.
Was he like 12 million followers, I think? Something like that?
Yes.
More listeners per month than
Yeah,
any of
anybody.
the primetime talk shows, Tucker, anyone.
Yeah, and that's one reason, they hate him, the establishment hates him because he's so much better at what they claim to do than they are, because they don't do what they claim to do.
And he's usually willing to talk about any subject and no subject's off limits, and yet to some tribes, I guess he is off limits, right?
And open to different perspectives,
It does.
too. He doesn't come in. Now, Joey brought this up. We'll talk about this later. I mean, he's got avowed views, some of which we agree with, some of which we don't. He's pretty much a socialist. But he's willing to listen to the other side.
Yeah.
And for that, he's being stoned. So the thing that got us thinking about this earlier today, though, was now his old friend The Rock has come out. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, who is my son's favorite actor. And I mean, I generally like The Rock. I generally like him. And he flirted I think it was back in the Bush years, he flirted with being a Republican a little bit. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't. It must have been a short flirtation.
It was, it was just a little bit out there. But he has increasingly kind of held his finger up to the wind to try to figure out where public opinion is. And now he has turned on Rogan as well. He had stood up for Rogan, and now he's turned on him.
Until the N-word.
Until the N-word controversy.
Yes.
So we've got that. We've got where The Rock announced this on Twitter, because, of course, we announce these things on Twitter now. Thank you so much for this. So anyway, The Rock is responding to someone who was pointing out Rogan's use of the N-word in the past. Thank you so much for this. I hear you as well as everyone here 100%. I was not aware of his N-word use prior to my comments, but now I've become educated to his complete narrative. Learning moment for me. Mahalo, brother, and have a great and productive weekend. DJ. Mahalo, brother. Mahalo, Joey.
There's something, I think you pointed this out earlier. There's something that very clearly sticks out in that tweet that's wrong. If you want to show it again really quick, just so I can point it out to the viewers. The part where he says, I've become educated to the complete narrative. It's exactly the opposite of that. He became educated to little snippets of things that Rogan said taken out of context where he was quoting people.
A narrative that's decades old.
It's decades old. It's not like he said it on his show last week. So that is just blatantly false. So The Rock has, and I'm
Yeah.
sure he just doesn't care to do any more investigating. He's just listening to whatever the mob says because that tends to be the way things go.
Sure.
But that part of that tweet is just blatantly wrong.
Do you think, Paul, do you think he just doesn't bother doing any more research, or do you think he's scared to do any more?
The big challenge with tribalism is you're constantly looking at what tribe is more vocal at any particular moment, right?
Right.
And
Which one's more
Joe
dangerous
Rogan,
to you?
which one's more dangerous at the
Yes.
given moment.
Yeah.
And not only does Joe Rogan and others have to be woke today, but we have to be retroactively woke to the past, right?
Right.
So we have to
Yes.
kind of figure out how to clean up our non-woke statements from decades ago and fit them into this narrative and apologize. But I think, The Rock is doing what the culture has taught us to do, and that is to learn to play whack-a-mole based on what's happening at the particular time.
The thing, I've said it on here before, it's Douglas Murray's thing. We now apologize for things that were perfectly fine 5 minutes ago.
Of course.
Yes.
And the N-word wasn't fine 5 minutes ago, but a lot of things were fine 5 minutes ago, and the left has weaponized those as bludgeons. And I don't, Joey, do you think when we think about cancel culture and when we think about the way the trans movement has weaponized elements of itself, do you think the left actually believes the stuff they're saying, or are they just weaponizing narrative?
No, I think maybe 10 years ago, they believed what they were saying.
Yeah.
Actually, I think 10 years ago, maybe they're weaponizing the narrative.
Yeah.
Now, I think they completely believe what they're saying. I think they live in an alternate reality. They have completely abandoned any element of truth. Sometimes we talk about here, we have truth on our side. Yeah. We believe in the truth, the fundamental truth. The left that doesn't even recognize that truth, doesn't live in that same reality. And I think they completely 100% believe in what they're saying at this point, because they don't see actual truth. It doesn't exist for them anymore.
Indeed. Can you imagine Jesus coming to the world today and saying, "I am the way and the truth and the life," and how he'd be vilified for that statement?
Yes.
Yeah, but yet we're his representatives here today, and we are saying that in a sense, and we are saying that publicly. And yet, again, we get back to what's in the moment. But I think that, the faith, the Christianity, the exploration, and the digging into truth is going to help us to stick out. But of course, we're going to be targeted.
Well, so here later in the show, we want to show you a clip of an exclusive interview we did with Phil Robertson, the Duck Commander. When he gets into, I know you guys haven't seen the interview yet.
Yeah.
He gets into that and references Christ clearly saying, "Look, they're going to hate you. The world is going to hate you because you love me."
Yes.
And it's not really even because they hate you; it's because they hate me.
That's right.
And so this is kind of contextually weird because this conversation is nested inside of a conversation about Joe Rogan.
Yes.
Who
It gives
is
us an opportunity to talk about it.
Yes, a psychedelic, pot-smoking, kind of hippie-ish MMA fighter. And being an MMA fighter isn't wrong. I'll leave psychedelics up to you. But
I think it's wrong.
Joe,
I do too.
I think Paul, you actually, both of you guys may know more about this than me. Paul, I bet you really have this, though. I know there's an interpretation in Scripture of the term, the term that gets translated as witchcraft actually seems to refer to some shamanistic practices, drug use, hallucinogens, and that sort of thing. I have heard that before, but I don't know if you've ever heard that.
I have heard that. Of course, substances been around since day one, and sorcery, witchcraft, all of that context in God's word has been said to be something we want to stay off limits, something we want to stay away from. Even the prophets of old were basically people who told what the news of the day going backwards, so they could say what was appreciated by the king, and not going into the future. They were basically saying what was happening in the past and trying to put a good spin on it to make the king's reputation be uplifted in a sense.
Good.
Wow.
Yeah, that's good.
So there was some of that. I was thinking as we're kind of walking into the studio today, pretty soon these podcasters and these shows are going to be all about the apology show. they're going to spend their whole show apologizing because
Oh,
that's
yeah.
going to be
Yeah.
that's going to be the woke thing of that time. Oh, I apologize because I did this. I apologize because I did that. That's where we're heading.
We already have apology tours.
But the left never apologizes.
They never
Right.
apologize.
It's only us. We
Yeah,
lose
yeah,
so
Joe
much ground
Biden
when we apologize.
Joe Biden is yet to apologize.
Right.
Yet to apologize for
Agreed.
things he now says are absolutely terrible.
Agreed.
Well, Joe Biden in the 1980s on the U.S. Senate floor, there are videos of him. We ran an article on
Yeah.
it today of him quoting the N-word. And that's been taken out of context multiple times in videos where you can't tell that he's quoting
Yeah.
someone and shared. And
Yeah,
that's wrong, just
yeah.
like it was for Rogan. So like it's fine when Joe Biden does it, who's now the president of the United States, but Joe Rogan must be canceled and removed
He's
from
the
the
whitest
show
white
over it.
guy ever.
Yes.
Rogan's not even that white. He's kind of Mediterranean.
And that's not even getting into Joe Biden's other problems that he's had
Right.
with race, things he
Right.
said. But
So-
it's really interesting.
So Rogan is talking about, he's trying to soften it by saying it depends on the context,
Yeah.
the context in which I was talking about this, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And yet Biden is guilty of the same thing in the context of what he was saying. It may have fit the context. And again, since we're retro woking back in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
I do think you're right. We're approaching the point where there are apology shows.
Yes.
And have either of you guys seen Black Mirror?
Yeah.
You probably
I have
I
not.
have.
Do you remember the episode I'm talking
me
about?
out.
So there's an episode of I think it's Black Mirror, where you essentially everybody is given a social media
Yes,
score.
I did watch that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you transgress far enough, you have to go on an apology tour,
Yeah.
admit
There
you
you
were wrong.
There
And
you
if you don't convince the public that you are sincere, I can't remember if they execute you or they excommunicate you from the community. I
yeah.
can't remember what it was.
Well, aren't they the same in today's culture?
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
well, that's
excommunication
not
is
the
almost
truth.
almost the same.
That's the left's dystopian dream.
Right
It is. It is sameness,
Yeah.
uniformity, and them in control of the uniformity.
China
Yeah.
already has
Yeah.
a form of a social credit system. And so the U.S., if the left remains in control, I have no doubt is not that far off
Yeah.
from there.
So Rogan he's become kind of a touchstone, a cultural touchstone, and everybody kind of wants a piece of him right now, whether they like him or they hate him. But Joey, you had a good point about Rogan, and we hinted at it earlier. There are some things that conservatives rightly really like about Rogan. There's some things I really like about Rogan, but there are also some things that should probably keep us from completely lionizing this guy.
Yeah, I think the U.S. overall should be a marketplace of ideas. You should let people have their free speech. If they say something wrong, don't cancel them. Let people hear that speech and choose for themselves whether or not they want to listen to it. It's the same. That's why I don't think Whoopi Goldberg should have been suspended from The View. No, she said something wrong. Okay, well, people can either choose to watch The View, be mad at her, or not. That's their choice. More speech is always better than
I'd
less
rather know
speech,
what they're
I think.
really
Exactly.
thinking.
Versus just canceling them, shunning them from society. Let the people decide. So
Which Nazis do you prefer? The ones you can see or the ones you can't see?
yeah, exactly.
I want to know where the bad
So
guys
at least
are.
people know if you're crazy,
sure.
believing crazy things. But the issue I have with Rogan, I'm not advocating for canceling or censoring anyone. And it's not just Rogan. I think we get into people like Elon Musk and Tulsi Gabbard and
Sure.
even people like Andrew Yang. I think we tend to latch on to anyone from the other side or who's a moderate that even moves an inch in our direction. And we end up idolizing these people. And, there's people talking about Rogan being a new face of the conservative movement. And I don't think that Rogan
I don't think he's
is
quite
a new
we
face of the
understand
conservative movement.
conservatism.
Yeah, exactly. And how Elon Musk could be a leader in conservatism. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's dangerous to get into territory where we idolize these people who really fundamentally aren't conservatives. And we should beware of idolizing someone who has basically been, he was a huge Bernie Sanders supporter. He's an avowed socialist and he does drugs and all kinds of things. But I appreciate Rogan because he'll have anyone on his show. He's a great interviewer. He's open to all ideas. He doesn't have an agenda when he interviews. And I respect him. And I think his voice is very important for that. But in my opinion, I think we should tread carefully in idolizing him.
Yeah, Joey, I like what you said a lot, and that is the free and open exchange of ideas. And let's be willing to hear those things.
Absolutely.
And nothing gives us nothing anywhere says that we don't have a right to be offended from time to time. It's just how we react and respond to that.
Yeah.
And I often say, hey, let's have a dialogue. And the minute you start calling me names is the minute we're not having a dialogue anymore, right? So the free and open exchange of ideas is really that idea of free speech that we have. And to your point before, people have the power to turn the dial.
Yeah.
And nothing works better than the free market.
Exactly. Look at CNN. I mean, no one watches anymore.
Not anymore.
and maybe Rogan. I mean, he is a pretty. He's a pretty good crystallization of that First Amendment process,
Yes.
and maybe that's one of the reasons. I sound idiotic saying it. Maybe that's one of the reasons. Clearly, that's one of the reasons the left
Certainly.
doesn't like him.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
So, but you mentioned something earlier. You were talking about how some people were saying, "Hey, this guy's the new face of the conservative movement."
Yeah, that he could be a big player. And
I'm not sure what to make of that. I was puzzling over it while you guys were talking, because does that mean then that the people who are trying to crown him the new face of the conservative movement, that they're not conservatives themselves, or is it people outside of the conservative movement who are conflating him with a conservative? Does that question make sense? Do conservatives think he's a conservative, or is it populists who think he's a conservative? Do they think he's embodying conservative ideals? Who thinks he's embodying conservative ideals? That's what I'm trying to ask.
Go ahead, Joey.
I think, at least this is just kind of my opinion, the right for so long and conservatives just overall have not had someone in culture that has advocated for free speech and the exchange of ideas, that when someone does, I think sometimes people mistake that as full-on conservatism. And the marketplace of ideas, free speech, that is an element of conservatism. But I think it's because Rogan's such a cultural figure that they assume, oh, okay, he supports free speech. The left wants to cancel him, so he's conservative.
It's almost
he's
the Trump
like,
effect.
Yeah, I think it's almost the Trump effect. I think it's like that. I don't think that conservatives aren't conservative for thinking that. Yeah. I think it's just they're so desperate, and I think we all have been, for people in culture to come over to our side and give a voice to some of our ideas. Because Rogan can impact culture. He certainly can. He does.
Clearly does.
So I think it's just latching on to that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. I would say that as a young guy 30 years ago, driving around from appointment to appointment, listening to Rush Limbaugh, thinking finally somebody's voicing some things that I think about, right?
Yeah.
And the huge impact he had.
Right.
Obviously, he spawned others to come. And Joe Rogan is taking advantage of that opportunity to be an opiner. Now, he does it uniquely because he has opposing viewpoints on his show. And my children listen to him and think he's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I spend some time unwinding worldview issues that they may bring out from it.
Yeah.
But look, he's an entertaining, crystallizing kind of guy. And it's interesting to see that the people who, going back to what you were talking about before, Joey, the people on the left are now defining the terms. Words that you and I may think mean something over here are not meaning that anymore. Love, truth, tolerance, all these things. All these things that we have definite ideas about have changed in meaning. So now we seem to be talking past each other a lot because they have a different definition in their own mind.
My
really
old friend who you know of, Adrian Rogers, used to say that they use our words but their dictionary.
That is so brilliant. That's exactly right.
That is what it is. They use our words but their dictionary.
So we tend to get kind of frustrated in a sense because they're using our words and yet we're not communicating with each other, and that creates these isolationist camps from which The Rock does this and go, which camp am I listening to today, depending on how I interpret the terms.
Yeah. You said your kids listen to Rogan. How old are they?
So my children, I have 5. They're 29, 27, 25, 23.
Okay.
Boys, males. And they do listen to Rogan, and they will occasionally come back to me and say, hey, you got to listen to this podcast by Joe Rogan.
Man, about 20 years ago, your life was utter chaos, wasn't it?
So, yeah, when you called my house and you got the old-time telephone voice machine, it said, welcome to Mayhem Southwest. Because we were 7-5-3-1. At that time.
Woo!
So, but to that point, I am counterculture because I have more than 1.2 kids per household.
Yes.
And
That's rebellious
and
today. Yeah.
Joey, I actually had 2 Suburbans in my house at one time. The thought of the damage I was doing.
I had a math
Radical.
I had a math professor who was a pre-vat 2 Catholic. So super conservative, just awesome guy. I love this guy to this day. But I remember him giving me a paper one time that I think it's probably another pre-vat 2 professor had written, who's probably a math faculty, who said that essentially the left is headed for oblivion regardless, because while conservatives continue to have children and embrace heterosexuality, the left is pushing homosexuality, which can't produce offspring, and is aborting their own children. So just from a numbers perspective, and that kind of bleeds into Reagan's whole. I happen to have noticed everybody who's pro-choice has already been born.
That's right. I mean, the old joke is if you can't beat them, outbreed them, right? The challenge.
Well, wasn't that Bob Jones? Was it Bob Jones or Gothard's thing? One of those guys.
Could be. But again, the challenge of our cultural times is even children brought up in conservative homes are getting married later and having children later and having fewer children. So.
And there's so many horrible cultural influences growing up that, and I'm not that old. I'm only 22, but even growing up,
I love it.
I didn't have those influences that there are today on
it's
horrible.
My wife
today.
and I talk about it with our kids because I don't worry about it as much with our son, but our daughter always has an earbud in one ear.
Yeah.
And I know what's going in there. It's not scripture all day long.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Jamie and I tussle over whether is it okay for this to happen or is it not?
Yeah.
Right.
But it is inescapable. The world is absolutely everywhere.
So where's it going? Where do we think it's going as we take this trajectory and keep going? Where does the Rogan effect take us? And I know this is an out of left field question, but where do we take this?
Well, I was going to answer the question, where are we going? To Jesus. We are the world is coming to Jesus. That's what it ultimately is. So the Rogan himself, for the backlash for the entire mess.
I guess this kind of woke culture, this woke perspective where you feel you have to duck and pivot and bob and weave in order to sort of fit in somewhere. I mean, the culture wants to fit in. People want to fit in. They want to fit into community. Yeah. We are made for community.
So I don't know of anybody on the crazy neo-racist side of things that has 12 million people listening on Spotify or anywhere else. That's probably an encouraging thing.
Indeed.
They do have critical mass, but they have critical mass in these really small pockets. If they get together out in the streets to protest so-called police violence. And another really cool effect when they do that is they're no longer vulnerable to COVID. It's a really amazing thing.
Doesn't come out at riot.
So they hit critical mass there, and they've definitely hit critical mass in HR offices across corporate America, and then of course in academia. But out in the real world, I don't see these people. I don't see these people, but the media amplifies it because the media shares the worldview, or is at least sympathetic to. I don't think the media actually shares. I don't think the media actually believes all of that, but they have so much in common with these either useful idiots or neo-Marxists that they
and divisiveness drives ratings.
Divisiveness drives ratings. And wasn't you and I who were talking about this? I think it was Tara and I who were talking about this earlier today. Pornography being accepted. I've never been for the government shutting down some kind of cyber business, except I'm starting to reconsider that with Twitter. You could obliterate so much horror and vitriol and mess if you just shut down Twitter. Yes. And I'm not saying I'm for that, but I'm thinking about it.
Go ahead, Joey.
I'm not against it. It's a vile, horrible.
Does anybody think it helps us?
No, it's contributing to the destruction of culture and the world as we know it. The
psychopathology of the derangement of culture.
Yeah. Also, to answer your question, I think we're going to get to a point and I actually think we're starting to see this. So the left for so long was all about feminism, right? And men and women have to be equal, and the pay gap, and this and that. And now they've gone so far with it that they're actually erasing women. Because now you have men who are pretending to be women in women's sports and are dominating. So they're basically saying, oh, actually, men are better at sports and they should get to dominate women's sports, and women don't really matter. They are erasing the identity of women. They're essentially canceling what it means to be a woman. And so I think, at least I hope, cancel culture at some point implodes on itself, where they start canceling each other.
I think it has to,
everyone inside, they just start
does.
canceling each other because they will get offended by everything. Everything will be too wrong, too little woke, or not woke enough, and they'll cancel each other, and the rest of the world will be normal. People want to be normal.
People
want to be normal. People don't want to live in crazy
people
world. They just want to live normal. They want to have a house. They want to have a family. They don't want this craziness. So I hope it just cancels itself.
And those in those cancellation culture, areas are striving to be normal too, and they're trying to bring it out through force. I'm going to force you to accept me as normal. I'm going to force you in law and in culture and media to accept me as normal, even though the lifestyle I'm living and the values I hold are not.
Yes. I wish we had a long time to actually talk more about that, because it's such a bizarre. So we'll talk quickly. It's such a bizarre expectation that you can live in a radically countercultural way, and expect culture to embrace you, and whether you believe that we were specially created or that we evolved. And I think most of the folks on that side think we evolved. There's a strong argument from evolution for why, we absolutely should not embrace things that look different, because things that are different may kill you.
Right. Exactly.
But the hubris, the arrogance to demand that the society, the culture, bend to you instead of you bending to the culture. It is remarkable.
It's this. Sorry, I don't mean that. No. It's this small minority of the country wielding extreme power against most of the population.
Through Twitter and the media.
Think about, in Congress, how many transgender members are there of Congress? None, right?
None yet.
That we know.
I'm not sure. It probably won't be long before.
It won't be. I think, there's a couple that have announced.
They consider laws. One of Joe Biden's first acts as president was to allow transgender people into whatever bathroom of their choosing. They are using the highest level of government power exerted over 90% of the population for 0.01% of people. And that's really alarming.
Federalism solves that. A big part.
Anyways, sorry.
I'm going to inject one thing. Do we have a minute? Okay.
Yes. I was probably about to pass to you for this.
Well, thank you. I go back to the founders. I go back to sort of the worldview there. I go back to John Adams, who was saying...
That's what I was passing to. They're signaling us
there
on
we
the
go.
monitor. Sorry.
Okay. Our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other, right? We know the quote well. He was saying that the worldview, the hearts, the values, the spirit of our government was that you can't legislate all this stuff. You have to have it within you. And ultimately, what we're trying to do at Liftable TV is share Christ-centered truth from a biblical worldview so people can understand that the values and how I live them out is going to impact culture. And Liftable TV is a safe place to get that dangerous message of Christ-centered content. So I'm just overjoyed to be on the Josh and Joey show today and to enjoy this time with you guys talking about these subjects, which are so near and dear to all of us, because we should be the catalyst for culture. We should be doing that. And that major word that the left has stolen from us, love, is without truth, there's no love. Without grace, there's no love. Both have to balance. And if I don't tell the truth, I'm not loving.
Well, Paul, you and I were talking about this earlier today, and this misunderstanding of what love is. We somehow have been taught that love means affection for and acceptance of.
Correct.
And there are pieces
in the culture
of that.
Right.
Yeah. You want to accept the person you love, fundamental part of them. But really, it means wanting the best for the other, wanting the best for the other person.
sometimes that's hard for the other
It's
person.
very hard. It is very, and it
Yes.
doesn't always feel loving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tough love,
Yeah.
as I think
Yeah.
Dobson used to say.
And with an element of sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, as a parent of 5, oftentimes you tell your children the truth. You do it in a graceful way, even though they may be upset with you. So it's a sacrificial thing, right?
Yeah.
You tell that you
gosh,
express
yeah.
express the truth in love and grace, knowing that the consequences to yourself may be harmful back to you.
Yeah.
Right?
And that is hard.
Yeah,
It's hard to do.
yeah,
It is hard to get. I have to remind my daughter every night that she's got a whole thing she has to go through with her teeth, because her teeth are made of pudding, apparently. So she has this fluoride treatment she has to do every night, and I have to remind her or she won't do it. And I've started going up and waking her up after she's gone to bed to get her to come down and do it. But most of the time, I just can't bring myself to do it, even though it's the best thing for her. I don't want to make that sacrifice, which is me upsetting her, which is not good. Okay, so yeah, we're about to be over, but I still want to take this clip. We've got a really
let's see it.
cool,
Yeah.
we've got a really cool interview with the Duck Commander, Phil Robertson, coming out in the next few days. Our very own Grant Atkinson sat down with Phil and had an interview. He has a new book out, Phil, not Grant, has a new book out about cancel culture. And Grant asked him, we've been talking about cancel culture and Rogan and The Rock and all of that on this. Grant asked him about responding to cancel culture sort of from a biblical perspective. Here's how that exchange went.
What would you say to, someone who is a Christian who thinks that they are, engaging in love by participating in this cancel culture?
Grant, they don't love each other. Love your neighbor as yourself. And here's what I'm trying to get America to do. Love does no harm to its neighbor.
So that's pretty good. I mean, that wraps it up pretty much perfectly.
Yeah.
How do you argue with Dr.
perfect.
Phil?
Yeah.
Yeah. so, but that is it. Love is the antidote to cancel culture.
Yeah.
The only,
So true.
again, I mentioned Douglas Murray earlier. Is Douglas Murray?
Yes.
Douglas Murray, or it was Jordan Peterson. I can't remember who was talking about the remarkable nature of forgiveness. Forgiveness is the only thing we've ever come up with, and we didn't come up with it. God did, to get us past previous wrongs. But if you won't exercise that, man, I mean, that your society is in deep, deep trouble.
Yeah.
And we've got an enormous portion of the population that is not interested in forgiving.
Indeed.
But there's hope. There is always Jesus. That's what the world is coming to. If you are sick of being inundated with leftist media and mainstream media, check out Liftable TV. Liftable TV. What's the web address? LiftableTV.com?
Liftable.tv.
Liftable.tv.
Here we go.
Check them out. There's loads of wonderful programming there. Also, please continue reading the Western Journal. You guys are what keep us in business. We value your readership. We value your viewership. If you feel led to support us in a more direct way, you can always go to westernjournal.com/join. That's westernjournal.com/join. There are several ways there that you can partner with us to get out the truth and to fight back against the left and to fight for the truth. And again, I only want you to do that if you feel led to. Don't let me talk you into it. Anything I can talk you into, somebody else can talk you out of. Let's see here. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Rumble, be sure to click the subscribe button. After you click that, a little bell will come up. You can click that bell. That'll make sure that you get a notification when we go live so you never miss an episode. Speaking of never missing an episode, we are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. And that's it for Joey, for Paul. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good to be with you.
I'm Josh Manning. This is WJ Live, and we will see you next time.